Devam Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayamudire Nashprayi Yavadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttam Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naistike. So continuing with the discussion on Srila Prabhupada Lilamrita by Srila Goswami, Volume 2, Planting the Seed, New York City, 1965 to 1966, Chapter 19th, Planting the Seed. Michael Grant. So this is the day when first initiation was going to take place, on the day after Janmashtami. Michael Grant. I first heard about the initiation just one day before it was to take place. I had been busy with my music and hadn't been attending. I was walking down Second Avenue when one of the prospective initiates, and he mentioned to me that there was going to be something called an initiation ceremony. I asked what it was about, and he said, all I know is that it means that you accept the spiritual master as God. This was a big surprise to me, and I hardly knew how to take it. But I didn't take it completely seriously, and the way it was mentioned to me in such an offhand way made it seem not very important. He asked me very casually whether I was going to be involved. And I also, being very casual about it, said, well, I think I will. Why not? I'll give it a try. Jan didn't think she would make an obedient disciple, and initiation sounded frightening. She liked the Swami, especially cooking with him, but it was Mike who convinced her he was going, so she should come along with him. Carl Jurgens knew something about initiation from his readings, and he, more than the others, knew what a serious commitment it was. He was surprised to hear that Swamiji was offering initiation, and he was cautious about entering into it. He knew that initiation means no illicit sex, intoxication, or meat eating, and an initiated disciple would have new responsibilities for spreading the teachings to others. Carl was already feeling less involved since the Swami had moved to Second Avenue, but he decided to attend the initiation anyway. Bill Epstein had never professed to be a serious disciple. Holding initiation was just another part of the Swami's scene, and you were free to take it seriously or not. He figured it was right to take initiation even if you weren't serious. He would try it. Carol Baker was surprised to hear that some people would be taking initiation even though they had no intentions of giving up their bad habits. She had stopped coming around regularly ever since the Swami had moved, and she felt no desire to ask for initiation. The Swami probably won't initiate women anyway, she figured. Robert Nelson hadn't forgotten the Swami and always liked to help whenever he could. But except for an occasional friendly visit, he had stopped coming. He mostly stayed to himself. He still lived uptown and wasn't into the Lower East Side scene. James Green thought he wasn't pure enough to be initiated. Who am I to be initiated? But the Swami had asked him to bring something over to the storefront. And I came, and it was just understood that I was supposed to be initiated. So I thought, why not? Stanley had been chanting regularly again and had come out of his crazy mood. He was sticking with the Swami and his followers. He asked his mother if he could be initiated, and she said it would be all right. Steve wanted more time to think about it. Keith was in the hospital. Bruce had only been attending for a week or two, and it was too soon. Chuck was on a week's vacation from the regulated spiritual life at the temple, so he didn't know about initiation. No one was asked to shave his head or even cut his hair or change his dress. No one offered Prabhupada the traditional Guru Dakshina, the donation a disciple is supposed to offer as a gesture of his great obligation to his master. Hardly anyone even relieved him of his chores. So Swamiji himself had to do most of the cooking and other preparations for the initiation. He was perfectly aware of the mentality of his boys, and he didn't try to force anything on anyone. Some of the initiates didn't know until after the initiation, when they had inquired, that the 4 rules, no meat eating, no intoxication, no illicit sex, no gambling, were mandatory for all disciples. So they didn't even know until after initiation. Prabhupada's reply then was, I'm very glad that you're finally asking me that. It was to be a live Vedic sacrifice with a ceremonial fire right there in the front room of Swamiji's apartment. In the center of the room was a sacrificial arena, a platform of bricks 4 inches high and 2 feet square, covered with a mound of dirt. The dirt was from the courtyard and the bricks were from a nearby gutted building. Around the mound were 11 bananas, clarified butter, sesame seeds, whole barley grains, 5 colors of powdered dyes, and a supply of kindling. The 11 initiates took up most of the remaining space in the front room as they sat on the floor, knee to knee around the sacrificial arena. The guests in the hallway peered curiously through the open door. For everyone except the Swami, this was all new and strange, and every step of the ceremony took place under his direction. When some of the boys had made a mess of trying to apply the Vaishnav tilak to their foreheads, Prabhupada had patiently guided his finger up their foreheads, making a neat, narrow V. He sat before the mound of earth looking out at his congregation. They appeared not much different from any other group of young hippies from the Lower East Side who might have assembled at any number of happenings, spiritual, cultural, musical, or whatever. Some were just checking out a new scene. Some were deeply devoted to the Swami, but everyone was curious. He had requested them to chant the Hare Krishna mantra softly throughout the ceremony, and the chanting had now become a continual drone, accompanying his mysterious movements as head priest of the Vedic rite. He began by lighting a dozen sticks of incense. Then he performed purification with water. Taking a spoon in his left hand, he put 3 drops of water from a goblet onto his right and sipped the water. He repeated the procedure 3 times. The 4th time he did not sip but flicked the water onto the floor behind him. He then passed the spoon and goblet around for the initiates who tried to copy what they had seen. When some of them placed the water in the wrong hand or sipped in the wrong way, Swamiji patiently corrected them. Now he said, repeat after me. And he had them repeat 1 word at a time, a Vedic mantra of purification. Om apavitra pavitro va sarvasthan gato piva yasmarit vandirekaksham sabhaya vyantara shuchihi. Shri Vishnu, Shri Vishnu, Shri Vishnu. The initiates tried falteringly to follow his pronunciation of the words which they had never heard before. Then he gave the translation, Upanishads are purified, unpurified or purified, or even having passed through all situations, one who remembers the lotus-eyed Supreme Personality of Godhead is cleansed within and without. 3 times he repeated the sipping of water, the drone of the Hare Krishna mantra filling the room as the goblet passed from initiate to initiate, and back again to him, and 3 times he led the chanting of the mantra, Om Pavitra. Then he raised a hand, and as the buzzing of the chanting trailed off into silence, he began his lecture. After the lecture, he asked the devotees one by one to hand him their beads, and he began chanting on them, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. The sound of everyone chanted filled the room. After finishing one strand, he would summon the owner of the beads and hold the beads up while demonstrating how to chant. Then he would announce the initiate's spiritual name. And the disciple would take the beads, bow to the floor and recite, Namo Vishnu Padaya, Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale, Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swami Niti Namine. I offer my respectful obeisances unto His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami, who was very dear to Lord Krishna, having taken shelter at his lotus feet. There were 11 initiates, and so 11 sets of beads, and chanting lasted for over an hour. Prabhupada gave each boy a strand of neck beads, which he said were like dog collars, identifying the devotee as Krishna's dog. So now we will read who became whom. So first set of initiated devotees. After Wali received his beads and his new name, Umapati, he returned to his place beside Howard and said, that was wonderful. Getting your beads is wonderful. In turn, each initiate received his beads and his spiritual name. Howard became Haigriva, Wally became Umapati, Bill became Ravindra Sarupa, Carl became Karlapati, James became Jagannath, Mike became Mukunda, Jan became Janaki, Roy became Rayaram, and Stanley became Strayadhisha. Another Stanley, Brooklyn boy with a job, and Jen is a college student from Montreal, both of whom had rather peripheral relationships with the Swami, appeared that night and took initiation with the rest, receiving the names of Satyavrat and Janardhan. Then Swamiji began the fire sacrifice by sprinkling the colored dyes across a mound of earth before him. With fixed attention, his congregation watched each mysterious move as he picked up the twigs and wooden splinters, dipped them into clarified butter, lit them in a candle flame, and built a small fire in the center of the mound. He mixed sesame seeds, barley, and clarified butter in a bowl and then passed the mixture around. Each new disciple took a handful of the mixture to offer into the fire. He then began to recite Sanskrit prayers, asking everyone please to repeat them, each prayer ending with the responsive chanting of the word Swaha 3 times. And with Swaha, the initiates would toss some of the sesame barley mixture into the fire. Swamiji kept pouring butter, piling up wood, and chanting more prayers until the mound was blazing. The prayers kept coming, and the butter kept pouring, and the fire got larger, and the room got hotter. After 15 or 20 minutes, he asked each of the initiates to place a banana in the fire. With 11 bananas heaped on the fire, the flames began to die, and the smoke thickened. A few of the initiates got up and ran coughing into the other room, and the guests retreated into the hallway. But Swamiji went on pouring the remaining butter and seeds into the fire. This kind of smoke does not disturb, he said. Other smoke disturbs, but this kind of smoke does not. Even though everyone's eyes were watering with irritation, he asked that the windows remain closed, so most of the smoke was contained within the apartment, and no neighbors complained. If the smoke had gotten out and neighbors would have called the fire or police, they would have come and put out the fire. Swamiji smiled broadly, rose from his seat before the sacrificial fire, the blazing tongue of Vishnu, and began clapping his hands and chanting Hare Krishna. Placing one foot before the other and swaying from side to side, he began to dance before the fire. His disciples joined him in dancing and chanting, and the smoke abated. He had each disciple touch his beads to the feet of Lord Chaitanya and the Panchtattva picture on the table. And finally, he allowed the windows opened. As the ceremony was finished and the air in the apartment was clearing, Swamiji began to laugh. There was so much smoke, I thought they might have to call the fire brigade. Prabhupada was happy. He arranged that prasadam be distributed to all the devotees and guests. The fire, the prayers, the vows, and everyone chanting Hare Krishna had all created an auspicious atmosphere. Things were going forward. Now there were initiated devotees in the Western world. Finally, most of the disciples went home to their apartments, leaving their spiritual master to clean up after the initiation ceremony. September 10th. The morning after the initiation, Prabhupada sat in his apartment, reading from a commentary on the Srimad Bhagavatam. The large Sanskrit volume lay before him on his desk as he read. He wore horn-rimmed glasses which changed his demeanor, making him look extremely scholarly. He wore eyeglasses only for reading, and this added to the visual impression that he had now gone into deep professional meditation. The room was quiet and brilliant. Mid-morning sunlight shone warmly through the window. Suddenly someone knocked on the door. Yes, come in, he looked up, removing his glasses as Mike and Jan, now Mukunda and Janaki, opened the door, peering in. He had asked to see them. Yes, come in, he smiled. And they walked in and closed the door behind them, two vivacious young Americans. From his expressive eyes, he seemed to be amused. They sat down before him, and Prabhupada playfully addressed them by their new initiated names. So you are living together, but now you have taken serious vows of initiation. So what will you do about it? Well, Mukunda seems puzzled. Isn't there any love in Christian consciousness? Swamiji nodded. Yes, so I'm saying, why don't you get married? They agreed it was a good idea, and Prabhupada immediately scheduled a wedding date for 2 days later. Prabhupada is doing so much for them. Swamiji said he would cook a big feast and hold the marriage ceremony in his apartment. He asked Mukunda and Janki to invite their relatives. Both Mukunda and Janki had grown up in Oregon, and their family members found it impossible to travel such a long distance on such short notice. Only Janki's sister, Joanne, agreed to come. Joanne. Little did I know what kind of wedding it would be. All I knew was that they had met a Swami and were taking Sanskrit from him, as well as attending his small storefront temple on 2nd Avenue. When I met the Swami, he was sitting beside the window in his front room, bathed in sunlight, surrounded by pots of prasadam, which he was distributing to the devotees who were sitting around him against the wall. I was a follower of macrobiotics and not so eager for taking this noonday meal. When I entered the room, the Swami asked, "Who is this?" And Mukunda said, "This is Janki's sister, Joanne. She has come from Oregon to attend the wedding." So all from Oregon to New York, very, very long distance. Swamiji said, "Oh, where is Oregon?" Mukunda said, "It is 3,000 miles away on the other side of the United States." And he asked, "Oh, coming from so far, very nice. And when will the other members of the family arrive?" Then I said, "I'm the only one who's coming for the wedding, Swamiji." He said, "Never mind. It's very nice that you have come. Please sit down and take some Krishna Prasada." He offered me some dal, a rather moist sabji, yogurt, salad, and chapatis. But because I was a devotee of macrobiotics, all of this prasadam was very unpalatable to me. Practically speaking, it was sticking in my throat the whole time. But I remember looking over at the radiant and beautiful person who was so eager for me to take this prasadam that he had prepared. So I took it all, but in my mind, I decided this would be the last time I would take this luncheon with the devotees. and I don't know if you know or not, this lady, Joanne, sister of Mother Janaki, she later took initiation and became Jamuna Devi. Right now she is talking, "Oh, I didn't want prasadam," a follower of macrobiotics, and she became such a special cook for Prabhupada and for all the devotees. She wrote this book, Yamuna's Cooking. Huge, very, very big book. And it has all the recipes. All means, I would say, like 80% of recipes that we can think of. She went all over India learning different ways of cooking. And she wrote down everything in her book. And she also, when we go to the temples in the morning Aarti, so we hear this lady singing Govinda Madhipur. We get this tape going on when darshan time is there. She is the one who sang it with Beatles. Govinda Madhipur Shantamam. So right now she's like, "Oh, I didn't want to take, this is the last time I would take this luncheon with the devotees." At any rate, somehow I finished the meal, and Swamiji, who had been looking over at me, said, "You want more? You want more?" And I said, "No, thank you. I'm so full." It was very nice, but I can't take anymore. So finally, the prasadam was finished, and they were all getting up to clean. And Swamiji commented that he wanted to see Mukunda, Janki, and myself for making preparations for the wedding the next day. So when we were all sitting in the room with him, the Swami reached over into the corner where there was a big pot with crystallized sugar syrup sticking to the outside. I thought, "Oh, this is supposed to be the peace, the resistance, but I can't possibly take any more." But he reached his hand into the pot anyway and pulled up a huge, round, dripping gulab jamun. And I said, "Oh no, I'm so full, I couldn't take any." And he said, "Oh, take it." And he made me hold out my hand and take it. Well, By the time I finished the gulab jamun, I was fully convinced that this would be the last time I would even ever come here. Then he began explaining how in the Vedic tradition, the women's side of the family made lavish arrangements for the wedding. And since I was the only member of the family who had come to assist, I should come the next day and help him make the wedding feast. So the next day at 9, while Janki was decorating the room for fire sacrifice, stringing leaves and flower garlands across the top of the room, I went upstairs to meet Swamiji. When I arrived, he immediately sent me out shopping with a list, 5 or 6 items to purchase. One of those items was not available anywhere in the markets, although I spoke to so many shopkeepers. When I came back, he asked, "Oh, you have obtained all the items on the list?" And I said, "Well, everything except for one." He said, "What is that?" I said, "I don't know. Well, no one knows what tumor is." Actually, it was supposed to be turmeric. He had me wash my hands and sat me down in his front room on the floor with a 5-pound bag of flour, a pound of butter, and a pitcher of water. And he looked down at me and said, "Can you make a medium soft dough?" I replied, "Do you mean a pastry or a pie crust or short crust dough or a pate brisée dough? What kind of pastry do you want?" "How old are you?" he said. And I said, "I'm 25, Swamiji." "You're 25," he said, "and you can't make a medium soft dough? It is custom in India that any young girl from the age of 5 years is very experienced in making this dough. But never mind, I'll show you." So he very deftly emptied the bag of flour and with his fingertips cut the butter until the mixture had a consistency of coarse meal. Then he made a well in the center of the flour, poured in just the right amount of water, and very deftly and expertly kneaded it into a velvety, smooth, medium soft dough. He then brought in a tray of cooked potatoes, mashed them with his fingertips, and began to sprinkle in spices. He showed me how to make and form potato kachoris, which are fried Indian pastries with spiced potato filling. From 11 until 5 that afternoon, I sat in this one room making potato kachoris. 11 till 5, 6 hours. Meanwhile, in the course of the same afternoon, Swamiji brought in 15 other special vegetarian dishes, each one in a large enough quantity for 40 persons, and he had made them single-handedly in a small, narrow kitchen. Can we even imagine? 15 vegetarian dishes, enough quantity for 40 persons, and he was making it by himself. Can't imagine, cannot imagine. It was rather hot that afternoon and I was perspiring. I asked Swamiji, "May I please have a glass of water?" He peeked his head around the door and said, "Go, wash your hands." I immediately did so, and when I returned, Swamiji had a glass of water for me. He explained to me that while preparing this food for offering to the Supreme Lord, one should not think of eating or drinking anything. So after drinking the glass of water, I went in and washed my hands and sat down. After about 2 in the afternoon, I said, "Swamiji, may I have a cigarette?" And he peeked his head around the corner and said, "Go wash your hands." So I did, and when I came back, he explained to me the 4 rules of Krishna consciousness. I continued to make the kachoris, and around 3:30, 4 o'clock, it was extremely warm in the room, and as Swamiji was bringing in one of his preparations, I was wiping my arm and hand across my forehead. He looked down at me and said, "Please go and wash your hands." Again, I did so, and upon returning, he had a moistened paper towel for me. He explained that cooking for Krishna required certain standards of cleanliness, purity, and that were different than the ones I was accustomed to. So, well, anyway, we'll stop here. Carry on with the rest of the description tomorrow. See anybody has any questions or comments? Okay, you all have safe and wonderful day. Hare Krishna, Jai Shri Prabhupada.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.